Mine is Mr. Delay, and well, welcome to my classroom, and also welcome to Columbine Elementary School, place where Mr. calls home as the principal. He's a pretty cool dude. He wears ties and bow ties and has a delightful accent that someday I will accomplish copying. But until then, I'm gonna leave it up to Mr. Today on the blog, lots of things. Poem, Those Winter Sundays by Robert Hayden. It's pretty exciting. You're gonna get a kick out of it. Your writing prompt is going to be 5 ideas for a novel you'll never write. I'll be writing it with you, so you get to watch me do it, and then you can do it on your own. The lesson, we're going to be talking about summary, how to summarize the short story, Charles. I think you're going to enjoy it. It's very brief, but it also makes you think. It makes you use your brain, which we're key on here. And lastly, but never leastly, the artist for today is a man by the name of Louis Prima, and his song that we're going to be talking about is Buenos Aires. My name is Mr. Delay, that's Columbine, this is a vlog, class is now in session.
Talk nerdy to me. You name all 12 of the dogs, I can't resist that. And what's the going go on? I think that ours match. Talk nerdy to me. Talk nerdy to me.
Well, welcome to Tuesday. Today, first off, we read a poem. That poem is Robert Hayden, Those Winter Sundays. Sundays too, my father got up early and put his clothes on in the blue back cold. Then, with cracked hands that ached from labor in the weekday weather made, banked fires blaze. No one ever thanked him. I'd wake and hear the cold splintering, breaking. When the rooms were warm, he'd call, and slowly I would rise and dress, fearing the chronic angers of that house. Speaking indifferently to him, who had driven out the cold and polished my good shoes as well, what did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices? So what Robert Hayden is talking about here is that the figure in the home, at least for Robert Hayden, was his father. And this is speaking of like a home in the midst of a real brutal winter, a home that doesn't have central heating, a home that was heated by like wood fires in each room that were contained in containers. And what he's saying is that his dad on Sundays would get up and get dressed in the cold, the blue back cold, so your back would be blue from the cold. Again, that imagery. And it gives you the idea his hands were cracked from all the hard work, and they ached from labor in the weekday weather, and he would make these banked fires blaze, and he makes a point to say that no one ever thanked him. The cold, splintering, breaking. So as the warmth begins to fill the house, the cold splinters and breaks away and flees from the warmth. And then on the third stanza, he says, speaking indifferently to him, and he had done these things, he had polished my shoes, and he says, what do I know? What did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices? And he's basically talking about regret that he didn't thank his father or thank the person that he lived with or that lived with him that was helping and caring for him, that he didn't extend to him that humanity and that kindness and that love that everyone deserves. And so it's an interesting kind of story to a poem to kind of sit in for a little bit. A lot of times we don't thank the people around us who do the good things for us and who help us and who make great things evident and do great things for us. So that's kind of what that poem's talking about. Next on the list is our writing prompt. And our writing prompt for today is 5 ideas for a novel that you'll never write. I'm going to set my timer for 2 minutes. Your time and my time starts now. Again, your prompt is 5 ideas for a novel that you'll never write. novels that I would never write, but novels titles or ideas that I would never write. Novel 1 would be The Punk and the Straight Edge Detective Story, the story of a mouthy, foul-mouthed, purple-haired detective, and then a straight-laced detective who is all prim and proper and uses his fork and his knife in the proper hands and follows all the rules and that kind of stuff. Novel 2 would be the story of World War II, but told in space. It's a weird story. I've tried to start it a couple times, and every time I'm just like, this is not good. This is worse. Oh, it's bad. So it never really takes off. Novel number 3, a romantic comedy. I don't know if I could ever actually write one like that. I would want to, but Novel 4, the story of my life as an educator. I have already too many stories of what it's like to be a teacher, and the good stories and not so great stories, but a lot of the good stories that I've lived. But I would never have the time to sit down and write that story. Novel 5 would be Star Wars as an opera. I think it would be fantastic. I'm sure it's already been produced by somebody out there. Luke Skywalker's, oh, yeah, and Darth Vader's, oh. There you go. $1 million idea. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year for that one. So what I'm going to do for you is I'm actually going to read Charles to you. I know that you probably had a hard time understanding it fully, so I'm going to go ahead and read from start to finish the short story Charles that I assigned you on this video blog. So here we go with Charles. The day my son Laurie started kindergarten, he renounced corduroy overalls with bibs and began wearing blue jeans with a belt. I watched him go off the first morning with an older girl next door, seeing clearly that an era of my life was ended. My sweet-voiced nursery school tot replaced by a long-trousered, swaggering character who forgot to stop at the corner and wave goodbye to me. He came home the same way, the front door slamming open, his cap on the floor, and the voice suddenly become raucous, shouting, "Isn't anybody here?" At lunch, he spoke instantly to his father, spilled his baby sister's milk, and remarked that his teacher said we were not to take the name of the Lord in vain. "How was school today?" I asked, elaborately casual. "All right," he said. "Did you learn anything?" his father asked. Laurie regarded his father coldly. "I didn't learn nothing," he said. "Anything?" I said. "Didn't learn anything." "The teacher spanked the boy, though," Laurie said, addressing his bread and butter. "For being fresh," he added with his mouth full. "What did he do?" I asked. "Who was it?" Laurie thought. "It was Charles," he said. "He was fresh. The teacher spanked him and made him stand in a corner. He was awfully fresh." "What did he do?" I asked again, but Laurie slid off his chair, took a cookie, and left without his father, while his father was still saying, "See here, young man." The next day, Laurie remarked at lunch as soon as he sat down, "Well, Charles was bad again today." He grinned enormously and said, "Today, Charles hit the teacher." "Good heavens," I said, mindful of the Lord's name. "I suppose he got spanked again?" "He sure did," Laurie said. "Look up," he said to his father. "What?" his father said, looking up. "Look down," Laurie said. "Look at my thumb. Gee, you're dumb." He began to laugh insanely. "Why did Charles hit the teacher?" I asked quickly. "Because she tried to make him color with red crayons," Laurie said. "Charles wanted to color with green crayons, so he hit the teacher and she spanked him and said nobody played with Charles, but everybody did." The third day, it was Wednesday of the first week, Charles bounced a seesaw on its head of a little girl and made her bleed, and the teacher made him stay inside all during recess. Thursday, Charles had to stand in a corner during story time because he kept pounding his feet on the floor. Friday, Charles was deprived of blackboard privileges because he threw chalk. On Saturday, I remarked to my husband, "Do you think kindergarten is too unsettling for Laurie? All this toughness and bad grammar, and this Charles boy sounds like such a bad influence." "It'll be all right," my husband said reassuringly. "Bound to be people like Charles in the world. Might as well meet them now as later." On Monday, Laurie came home late, full of news. "Charles!" he shouted as he came up the hill. I was waiting anxiously on the front steps. "Charles!" Laurie yelled all the way up the hill. "Charles was bad again." "Come right in," I said, as soon as he came close enough. "Lunch is waiting." "You know what Charles did?" he demanded, following me through the door. "Charles yelled so in school they sent a boy in from first grade to tell the teacher she had to make Charles keep quiet, and so Charles had to stay after school, and so all the children stayed to watch him." "What did he do?" I asked. "He just sat there," Laurie said, climbing into the chair at the table. "Hiya, Pop, you old dust mop." "Charles had to stay after school today," I told my husband. "Everybody stayed with him." "What does this Charles look like?" my husband asked Laurie. "What's his other name?" He's bigger than me, Lori said, and he doesn't have any rubbers, and he doesn't even wear a jacket. Monday night was the first parent-teachers meeting, and it was only the fact that the baby had a cold kept me from going. I wanted passionately to meet Charles' mother. On Tuesday, Lori remarked suddenly, "Our teacher had a friend come to see her in school today." "Charles's mother?" my husband and I asked simultaneously. "Nah," Lori said scornfully. "It was a man who came and made us do exercises. We had to touch our toes. Look." He climbed down from his chair and squatted down and touched his toes. "Like this." He got solemnly back into his chair and said, picking up his fork, "Charles didn't even do exercises." "That's fine," I said heartily. "Didn't Charles want to do exercises?" "Nah," Lori said. "Charles was so fresh to the teacher's friend that he wouldn't let him do exercises." "Fresh again," I said. "He kicked the teacher's friend," Lori said. "The teacher's friend told Charles to touch his toes like I just did, and Charles kicked him." "What are they going to do about Charles, do you suppose?" Lori's father asked him. Lori shrugged elaborately. "Throw him out of school, I guess," he said. Wednesday and Thursday were routine. Charles yelled during story hour and hit a boy in the stomach and made him cry. On Friday, Charles stayed after school again, and so did all the other children. With the third week of kindergarten, Charles was an institution in our family. The baby was being a Charles when she cried all afternoon. Lori did a Charles when he filled his wagon full of mud and pulled it through the kitchen. Even my husband, when he caught his elbow in the telephone cord and pulled telephone ashtray and a bowl of flowers off the table, said after a moment, "Looks like Charles." During the third and fourth weeks, it looked like a reformation in Charles. Lori reported grimly at lunch on Thursday of the third week. "Charles was so good today, the teacher gave him an apple." "What?" I said, and my husband added warily, "You mean Charles." "Charles," Lori said. "He gave the crayons around, and he picked up the books afterward, and the teacher said he was her helper." "What happened?" I said incredulously. "He was her helper, that's all," Lori said, and shrugged. "Can this be true about Charles?" I asked my husband that night. "Can something like this happen?" "Wait and see," my husband said cynically. "When you've got a Charles to deal with, this only means he's been plotting." He seemed to be wrong. For over a week, Charles was the teacher's helper. Each day he handed things out and he picked things up, and no one had to stay after school. The PTA's meeting is next week again," I told my husband one evening. "I'm going to find Charles's mother there." "Ask her what happened to Charles," my husband said. "I'd like to know." "I'd like to know myself," I said. On Friday of that week, things were back to normal. "You know what Charles did today?" Lori demanded at the lunch table. In a voice slightly odd, "He told a girl to say a word, and she said it, and the teacher washed her mouth out with soap, and Charles laughed." "What word?" his father asked unwisely, and Lori said, "I'll have to whisper it to you. It's so bad." He got down off his chair and went around to his father. His father bent down, and Lori whispered joyfully. His father's eye widened. "Did Charles tell the little girl to say that?" he asked respectfully. He said it twice," Lori said. "Charles told her to say it twice." "What happened to Charles?" my husband asked. "Nothing," Lori said. "He was passing out the crayons." Monday morning, Charles abandoned the little girl and said the evil word himself 3 or 4 times, getting his mouth washed out with soap each time. He also threw chalk. My husband came to the door with me that evening as I set out for the PTA meeting. "Invite her over for a cup of tea after the meeting," he said. "I want to get a look at her." "If only she's there," I said prayerfully. "She'll be there," my husband said. "I don't see how they could hold a PTA meeting without Charles's mother." At the meeting, I sat restlessly, scanning each comfortable matronly face, trying to determine which one hid the secret of Charles. None of them looked at me haggard enough. No one had stood up at the meeting and apologized for the way her son had been acting. No one mentioned Charles. After the meeting, I identified and sought out Lori's kindergarten teacher. She had a plate with a cup of tea and a piece of chocolate cake. I had a plate with a cup of tea and a piece of marshmallow cake. We maneuvered up to one another cautiously and smiled. "I've been so anxious to meet you. I'm Lori's mother." "We're all so interested in Lori," she said. "Well, he certainly likes kindergarten," I said. "He talks about it all the time." "We had a little trouble adjusting that first week or so," she said primly. "But now he's a fine little helper, with occasional lapses, of course." "Lori usually adjusts pretty quickly," I said. I suppose this time it's Charles's influence." "Charles?" "Yes," I said, laughing. You must have had your hands full in that kindergarten with the Charles." "Charles," she said. "We don't have any Charles in kindergarten." Dun, dun, dun! Boop! It's a swerve. Lori is Charles! I love that swerve at the end of the story because you're just like, who is this kid? What is he doing? And then it's Charles. You have a summary assignment for today. It's just a summary. You just need to make a summary of Charles Remember, a summary is just basically 3 sentences. You summarize the beginning of the story, the middle of the story, and the end of the story. 3 sentences minimum. There's an assignment on Google Classroom, and it's good to go. Your artist is Louis Prima, and Buena Sera. That is your task. That is what you should be doing. My video is going to come to an end here because it's going to get too long. My name is Mr. Delay. That's the bell for class. I will see you in Google Hangouts. I will see you on Classroom, and I will see you wherever I see you electronically. You are loved. Stay safe. Be healthy. I'll see you in the next one.